So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down a sample that honestly sounds like the Armageddon. It sounds like the Rapture. It's so epic. It's so atmospheric and honestly a little bit evil. There's some really cool processing that's been done on some of these sounds that's made them sound quite different. And there's also a key change that happens towards the end. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to show you all the plugins, the VSTs that I used, and yeah, let's just get into it. So I'm currently making kind of a phrases texture kit with longer recordings of sounds and samples that I'm running through my hologram microcosm. This was a synth recording that I'd created and run through it, and without any plugins, it sounds like this. So it's just got a really cool, like bendy, kind of glitchy sound to it. I really like some of those kind of like swells and just the variation that's in that recording, and thanks to the microcosm. Now the first thing I did was just use some sound shifter, pitching it up 3 semitones, adding some EQ, just cutting out 250 hertz, and then some multi-band compression. I added a little bit of an interesting EQ, just cutting out some of the harsher frequencies, and some RC20 just for that kind of like vinyl-y effect. So without the plugins, and then with the plugins, so those plugins have really kind of lifted that sample and made it a bit more high frequency focused and a bit thinner, and that's because I'm leaving room for this next layer. So this came from Beatsinner's 10K kit, and there's a bunch of really awesome like longer recordings that he's done that are honestly like 30 seconds or however long, and they're just like distorted synths. And what I was able to do was just find a chop that I really liked, and this is the chop that I took without any plugins. So it's crazy, and honestly listening back to it, I'm like, I don't know how I thought that was gonna work, but I did make it work. And what I did was used the amazing halftime, which works on so many things. I used a full wet mix. I used Pancake, which just gave it some cool panning left to right. You can see the panning curve here. It's quite simple with a 40% mix. So it's kind of subtle, but still noticeable. I've had to dip a lot of the lows, keeping in mind that that first layer is going to kind of clash in that area. So that's why I've done that. I added the slightest bit of reverb, not really sure why I even bothered with that, and quite a crazy EQ. And again, this was because I had to duck a lot of the harsh frequencies and the clashing frequencies with the first texture. So this is what it sounds like now. So you can hear it panning, going from left to right, and it's kind of, it feels a lot more smushed and, you know, subdued. So now in combination together, so now those two layers just sit very, very nicely together. And that is why it's really important that you either sidechain or use a multi-band compressor or EQ as well to duck and boost kind of opposite frequencies so that they have their own pockets of space. And that's what I really had to do with these two layers. Once I had that, that was really the foundation of this sample. I then took this sound that's also my upcoming microcosm kit, and without any plugins, it sounds like this. Very sort of repetitive, swelling kind of sound. And what I did was just added sound shifter, a bunch more halftime. I used this Portal preset, which was the 4th shape pan, just to give it more of a rhythm and a chop. And then I pitched it up a full octave after that. I added the Fab Filter Saturn, which is just saturation basically, and using the Pultec EQ. And I love this EQ mostly even just for the sound that the EQ has, but I am also cutting up to 100 hertz off on it. And then again, multi-band compression, doing the same thing I mentioned earlier, ducking where those other frequencies are from the other tracks, and then boosting kind of more the highs where this one's going to sit. So now it sounds like this. Without. So there's really this kind of like alien type of vibe to it, because things are very bendy and glitchy sounding, and that bass is just all over the place. So now taking that same crazy distorted bass from the first section, check out how it sounds in this next bit. So you can still hear all that panning that's happening, but it's got a bit more reverb to it and just a different tone and texture. And the reason that I've done that is because now I've introduced this bass. Now this bass was a one shot, and it came from the drum kit Street Love, and it was just one of the bass one shots which I put into the sampler, and it literally just plays one note. So it sounds like this. So because that bass is now occupying that low end, I've added quite a bit of distortion on this bus 8, a little bit of multi-band compression, just compressing that low end, and not really anything happening on the EQ. But because there's that low end, I decided to adjust that distorted bass recording just so they would sit better together. Just sounds mean. Now, this next bit, I love this lead. Check this out. So for this lead, I've gone ahead and used this brutal voltage preset. This is within the Mini V4 from Arturia. It's a great VST. So many things to play around with and adjust. And the lead sound that I got just sounded really sharp and piercing. I made a few adjustments on the knobs and added a fair bit of reverb and some EQ and delay, just cutting out a lot of the lows, the delay as well here. Just a standard stock Logic delay. I love this delay, and it just sounds like this. It's really a kind of like EDM type of lead, but it just worked really nice because it's such an abrasive, harsh sounding lead. It kind of complements the other just harsh sounding bass frequencies that I have going on. So you've got the harsh highs, but also the harsh lows. And so that's why it's such an aggressive sounding sample. So yeah, together it just works really well. And I've taken that same sound from earlier and just given it more of a rhythmic chop to it. So it sounds like this. So you can see it kind of does carry over into a bit of the empty space. That's just because the halftime's working. So yeah, it still just gives it a bit more of a rhythmic variation. And then I have this layer here, which is also from my microcosm kit, and without any plugins, it sounds like this. So you can hear that the chop is kind of out of time. It's not really perfectly on tempo. What I will tend to do to kind of help force things into more of a rhythm without actually like stretching it too much is firstly using halftime, because this gives it a rhythmic chop. So now. See it already? It just kind of works. And then I've also used this time rotation preset from Portal. So So I just love that it's bouncing around. Again, it's a very dynamic layer, so it just adds to the chaotic nature of this sample. And then just some EQ, cutting out some lows again, and just even cutting out a lot of the highs and lows. So it just sounds like this. So it becomes quite a droney kind of just rhythmic texture in a sense. And again, it's just very different and contrasting from the lead. The bass. So I just wanted to keep that rhythm going because it is an emptier section, but I like having these very empty, spacious sections because the idea is that someone is going to add drums and also a vocalist to it. So it's just really nice to have the difference between sections like the beginning where a lot is happening, a lot of the frequency range is already taken up or occupied, and then contrasting that with a section where there's a lot less happening and more space, and it gives the listener or producer or artist just space to breathe, really. So now we're getting close to the key change. This is the last section. So just a cool, another little bit of variation towards the end. It's very subtle, but just to add to the impact of that key change, I just had this little swell here and then leading into this sweep effect, and I just got these sounds from Splice. And yeah, that's pretty much the sample. I didn't end up pitching the master, which I often do. I just added some multi-band compression, just compressing those lows, compressing some of the highs. I generally keep quite a fast attack on my multi-band compression just so it happens very quickly. And then I've also got an EQ that really isn't doing anything, maybe cutting out a little bit of the lows. Classic ARTG mastering plugin. Didn't do too much to this. This is just one of my kind of standard presets at this point, just boosting some of the mids and spreading the sample a bit so it's kind of wide. And then lastly, just a stock Logic limiter. So this is just making sure that it's not clipping or going above minus 0.2 dB. So, and if there's something I can leave you with or recommend is find or create your own recordings that are say 30 seconds, a minute, even 2 minutes or 5 minutes long, and just find chops from those recordings, little imperfections, anything, and just stretch it and play around with it. If you have pedals or equipment like this, run it through there and just get brand new sounds. It's really fun. If you don't have access to pedals or anything, even just using a bunch of plugins within your DAW, even if they're stock ones, you can still mess around with and manipulate those sounds to just be completely different. And also remembering that if you're going to especially have harsh or bassy frequencies, creating space for each other and just trying to make sure that each track you create has a purpose and kind of sits in its own pocket. And again, you can do that by either using like an EQ or a multi-band compressor to just duck one and boost the other and kind of just play opposites so everything has its own space. Hopefully that makes sense, and I've got plenty more sample breakdowns like this coming. So if you enjoyed this, stay tuned. My hologram microcosm texture kit is going to be out very soon. I'll announce that eventually. And if you want to get access to full compositions of mine, my samples with stems, you can click the link below. There's also a few different kits for sample makers like yourself. Until then, I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace.